As many of you may know, 2022 marks an important milestone for our industry. This year, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the game-changing Brooks Act, which made qualifications-based selection federal law. Congressman Jack Brooks, the bill's namesake, was a visionary who understood the value of our industry and understood what our industry brings to critical projects when taxpayer dollars are on the line. QBS allows our firms to put their experience, expertise, and ability front and center when competing for public work projects. The spirit of his legislation lives on in the Jack Brooks Foundation, which is chaired by the late Congressman's son, Jeb Brooks, and I am pleased that he has joined us today to share a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a big ACEC welcome to Jeb Brooks, chair of the Jack Brooks Foundation.
Well, good morning, and hello, fellow members of the ACEC. Thank you for affording me the privilege of being able to address you here today. I am the son of the former Congressman Jack Brooks and the chairman of the Jack Brooks Foundation. I wanted to say that during his career, my father made a commitment to all Americans to work tirelessly to craft quality legislation that benefited the whole of the nation. One shining example of that good public policy was the Brooks Act of 1972, making qualifications-based service the law of the land. ACEC and my father share similar dedication to the protections of QBS. I'm sure every person in this room is already aware of the importance of this legislation, but I'd like to spend some time this morning, shed a little personal insight on the impact of QBS, the strong partnership my father had with the ACEC and the AIA, and the work that Congressman Jack Brooks, or the work that the Brooks Foundation is doing to keep the message of this important work alive for the future. On the 27th of this month, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Brooks Act. It was a partnership with the ACEC, AIA, and Congressman Brooks that forged this piece of legislation. Just prior to its passage, Dad stood before this esteemed body, as I do today, to acknowledge the invaluable help and support he received from both architects and engineers. Back then, he had said, legislation, as you know, is an art, not a science. And I'm totally committed to the proposition that the federal government and the people of this nation have the benefit of the highest quality architectural and engineering services that this government can procure. I want you to know how deeply I appreciate the support you've given me in the past connection with this important legislation. Dad may have written the bill, but from that day forward, it has been the members of the ACEC who have adopted its spirit of this law and has made it so successful. While we pause to remember the passage of the act, it's really y'all who have applied it and make it work so well. Let's take a moment. Thank you. Let's take a moment to remember Jack Brooks, the man who spent 5 years trying to get the act passed. Oh, there we go.
In 1927, floods swept the southern states, and the Mississippi River didn't crest until it was 20 miles across at some points. The devastation wiped out crops and reduced millions of Southerners to a hard, scrabble existence. By the time 1928 rolled around, Grace and Edward Brooks had lost the family farm. They headed to Beaumont, Texas, a gritty river town still buzzing from the Spindletop oil boom. Jack Brooks grew up seeing hundreds of families moving to East Texas to find a decent job and an education for the kids. That made an impression on young Jack, an impression that would shape a political career spanning half a century. Jack Brooks took being an American seriously. enlisting in the Marines in 1942 and serving in the Pacific during World War II. After the war, he returned home to be a reporter for the Beaumont Enterprise. Jack quickly learned that his calling was not to report the news, but to make it. He seized his chance in 1946, winning a seat in the Texas legislature at the ripe old age of 23. Jack quickly developed a reputation as a feisty populist who would take on anyone when it came to sticking up for his constituents. In 1952, Jack decided to run for Congress. Shortly after being sworn in, he was invited by the legendary Sam Rayburn for a drink in his office. The meeting became a daily tradition known as the Board of Education, where the leaders would develop strategy for legislative battles. Congressman Brooks distinguished himself from many of his Southern colleagues by refusing to sign the Southern Manifesto and strongly supporting civil rights and expanding it to include women.
Jack would go on to win 26 consecutive elections, becoming one of the longest-serving members of Congress in U.S. history. But his biggest campaign was to win the heart of the lovely Charlotte Collins. He won in a landslide, and they wed in December 1960. It is said that Sam Rayburn helped make Jack Brooks a great politician, but Charlotte Collins helped make him a great man. Together, they built a beautiful family with 3 children, Jeb, Kate, and Kimberly.
Jack Brooks was part of the motorcade that fateful day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Congressman Brooks was among those who counseled longtime friend Lyndon Johnson to take the presidential oath before departing Dallas, Texas, to reassure a shaken nation.
On the Judiciary Committee, Jack Brooks drafted the first articles of impeachment against Nixon. History records that Jack Brooks stood up for Americans and the Constitution during that dark period in American history. As chairman of the Committee on Government Operations, Jack Brooks made it a priority to protect American taxpayers by increasing government efficiency in every area he could, all the way to increasing the lifespan of light bulbs used in federal buildings. The list of Jack's accomplishments go on and on, from flood control to the Johnson Space Center to making qualification-based selection the law of the land. So many people owe their jobs, their education, their safety, and their Social Security checks to Congressman Jack Brooks. For all that, we will forever be grateful, and will never forget hearing Jack Brooks say,
to get right down to it, that you ought to be instant helping people. You ought to be instant helping everybody.
Yeah, he's a pretty tough act to follow. Now let me tell you a story about what is behind Brooks's determination to enact legislation like QBS. Everyone here knows the basics. It's clear that QBS outperforms other procurement methods in terms of growth cost, time savings, consistency of success, and state-of-the-art innovation. I would like to add another important element to the list of QBS's unimpeachable benefits. To do this, let me share some personal background to the Brooks Act that is known only to a few. Way back in 1937, when my father was about 15, he was deeply influenced by a traumatic event that occurred in the nearby town of London, Texas. Nearly 500 people, mostly children from 5th grade through high school, were killed in a powerful natural gas explosion that destroyed their new school building. Ultimately, it was determined that a faulty gas pipe and shoddy construction had turned that school building into a bomb. While it would be years before my father entered public life, that memory of that terrible event never left him. It took Congressman Brooks some years in Washington to garner the necessary influence to right this wrong, and the practice of crafting the bill itself took 5 years to complete. What drove one man to work so hard to find a way to prevent that kind of catastrophic failure from occurring again in the country he loved? it is because Jack Brooks cared about people, especially the lives of his constituents and his fellow Americans. QBS, by ensuring the public works and buildings are designed and built correctly, safely, and by people with the appropriate qualifications, protects the folks that live and work around those structures. What greater goal can the safety of American lives, can our government or industry set for itself? The members of the ACEC have clearly and effectively risen to meet that goal project by hard-won project for 50 years. I submit to you that the moral imperative behind qualification-based selection is more than costs or savings. It is in saving human lives. With so much at stake, with QBS so obvious, one might ask, why is it even necessary to codify it? To answer that question, we have to wander into the turbulent waters of politics and ask what constitutes good public policy. For Americans, the answer can be deceptively simple. Does it help create a more perfect union? Our Constitution lists 4 key functions of government: establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, providing for the common defense, and the promotion of the general welfare. General welfare advances our nation's never-ending quest for a more perfect union. As engineers, you know how difficult it is to design and execute a multi-year construction project. Writing public policy, by comparison, may seem much easier. The Brooks Act had barely 200 words, took 5 years to become law. I can tell you, crafting public policy is incredibly difficult. As my father used to say, it's tough, tedious work. So was QBS law effective? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, your industry has created 14,000 new jobs every year and at salaries twice the national average. It's a powerful testament to the effectiveness of the act. If the writing of the laws is the science part, then writing effective legislation is the art part. I believe that the Brooks Act of 1972 represents an exemplary example of good public policy. It created a playing field where large and small companies can represent their qualifications and win contracts on that basis, rather than a race to the bottom to the lowest cost provider. But as I've said, Congressman Brooks did not do it alone. The assistance and expertise he received in partnership with the ACEC and the AIA combined to create a work of public policy that continues to support your industry. I'm very proud of my father, and I'm proud that QBS is part of our country. I'm equally proud of the accomplishments of the ACEC, its members, and their continued efforts to support and protect this important piece of legislation. The ACEC was formed, at least in part, to ensure that lawmakers, in order to ensure that any revisions to the myriad of regulations that impact your business receive the same support and expert advice that was afforded my father. The Jack Brooks Foundation was founded to support a similar goal. For 42 years, my father was one of the most productive members of Congress, generating over 1.5 million pages of laws and documents and briefs and other important pieces of legislation. The Jack Brooks Foundation was created to preserve this unparalleled trove of historic documents, which continues to provide the historic context and serves to remind people of today why his work carries significant importance even into the future. By providing a nuanced context, we hope to assist the ACEC with the extraordinary work y'all have already done in explaining the importance of QBS. For 2 years, the Foundation began an initiative with the Briscoe Center of American Studies with the goal of digitizing those millions of pages now languishing in paper form. A dedicated website has been created to help academics, writers, and historians and business people alike to electronically search the Brooks papers. The Briscoe Center is one of the largest governmental papers outside the Library of Congress, and its state-of-the-art digitization facilities use OCS technology to identify and data tag each word in every document. It's worth noting that at the end of this process, Dad's papers, including all that I mentioned above, will remain permanently available under the care of the University of Texas at Austin and the Briscoe Center. In pursuing the statistization goal, we hope to collaborate with the ACEC, like you all did in the past with my dad. Let's be honest, there's probably little about the passage of the act or what's happened since that the AC doesn't already know. But the JBF can bring a context to dull legal text, and in that way, we believe we can offer some assistance in humanizing QBS. Today, we celebrate the achievements of the ACEC and the bill that supported its achievements. Beyond the issues of financing, QBS saves lives, and that is a goal worth defending, especially when government officials want to try and just cut costs. The JBF would like to help ensure that qualification remains the selection criteria for the next 20 years. In summary, Jack Brooks cared about people. It was a core value of his. Congressman Jack Brooks also understood the value of quality public policy. Thanks to the critical help of the ACEC, QBS stands as a great example of the intersection of those two values. As engineers, you value the support of quality workmanship that is supported by QBS. I've suggested here today that an important part of your craftsmanship is in saving and protecting people's lives. I believe that the engineering industry is taking a cue from the Constitution and with QBS as its doctrine, making America a more perfect union. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and for constantly making America a safer and more beautiful place to live. Thank you.
So that was kind of a flashback. You know, that was a great video. I know you all enjoyed that as much as I did, but seeing the cigars, you know, and reminded of the spittoons that they have in Congress. It was a different place back then, but, you know, what a character in history he was, and the things that he witnessed. You know, I don't think we realized how full his life was. You know, we think of him in terms of this one piece of legislation, but he seriously was a hero in our history. So I do want to thank Jeb for that. I think that was an amazing story. And I want to urge all of you to remember that story and remember who he was and think about the humanity behind QBS and why it came about, because that's a really powerful story when you go and you talk to your clients about why you're pushing for QBS. So I think that was time well spent this morning. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I do. So let's, one more time, give Jeb Brooks and the entire Brooks Foundation, he'll hear us backstage, a big round of applause.